I don't think you should go on that trip," I said with a cold voice, only to be met with an annoyed glare from my husband. He was getting ready to join his company's retreat, clearly not thrilled about my input. "Look, it's not like I'm going out to play. It's a social obligation, and I can't just not show up without a good reason," he retorted in a mocking tone, followed by an exaggerated sigh. "Well, I've warned you. Just don't regret it later," I responded. "My name is Grace. Currently, I'm a 28-year-old housewife. Anthony, my husband, and I have been together since our college days and got married after we both started working. He's 2 years older than me, and we got closer because we were in the same club. Well, to be more accurate, I joined the club because I was attracted to him. When I was a freshman, I was club hopping with some new friends I made. That's when I met Anthony, who was exceptionally noticeable due to his good looks while handing out flyers as the head of the club. One of my friends fell for him instantly and decided to join the club even before hearing what it was about. Eventually, dragged along by her enthusiasm, the rest of us submitted our membership forms and started participating. Unlike in middle or high school, I figured if I didn't like the club since it was just a hobby, I could just leave. That was the mindset of my other friends too, and we had agreed to join something anyways. Deep down, I also found Anthony charming. However, when the friend who had decided to join because of him started making moves, I decided to step back. Plus, there were quite a few other fans of his, making it difficult to get close. But, how did I end up marrying him, you might ask? It was during the cultural festival that year, where our relationship rapidly developed. We were part of the music club, which performed in several groups during the festival. Anthony and I, along with a few others, ended up forming a band. For the first time, I felt genuinely glad to have joined the club and practiced an instrument. Discovering the joy of playing, I spent my free time in the club room. As the festival approached, I was there even more often. Sometimes, it was just Anthony and me, and through these moments, we grew closer and started dating after the festival, with me making the first move. However, after our successful performance at the festival, Anthony gained more admirers, and I chose to keep our relationship a secret. I wanted to brag about being with him, and he said it was unnecessary to hide. But he didn't understand my fear of other women's jealousy. We often targeted weekdays when it was less crowded for our outings. It felt like a secret date, which was fun in its own way, and I cherished the time I could spend with my husband. But then, he started his job search. Until he got an offer, even my usually calm husband was understandably tense. He seemed to have less time for part-time jobs, often complaining about being broke every time we met. Since the days we could meet were getting fewer, I secretly increased my shifts and used the money I earned to cook for him. "I feel pathetic having to rely on this," he would say, yet he happily devoured every meal I made. From that time, I vaguely imagined our life together as a married couple, though I thought it was too soon to mention it to my busy boyfriend. Eventually, when he landed a job and graduated, and I had my graduation confirmed, we got engaged. He rented a new apartment due to his job, and I often visited, almost living there. We were in a semi-cohabiting state, but he paid for the rent and utilities with his salary, so I helped out with household chores in return. I would make meals to last several days and store them in the fridge, take out the trash in the morning, and clean the bathroom and toilet. I thought I was doing well, but it turned out my husband was quite lazy. When I couldn't come over for a week due to some errands, I found the floor littered with trash. Maybe because it was his first year working, he often had entertainment duties and would leave the room unventilated. Opening the door to a room filled with the smell of sweat and garbage required bravery. But I loved my hard-working husband, and I appreciated his thoughtfulness, like bringing home fancy sweets to say thank you. After graduating, I worked in an office for a year, but then, at my husband's strong request, I became a housewife. The reason was simple. I want you to take care of the house. His lifestyle habits remained the same, with me handling most of the household chores. Additionally, the number of drinking parties increased over the years, making financial management challenging. However, since we lived on my husband's income, it was hard to ask him to cut down on social gatherings. He was supportive when I occasionally met with friends, even giving me some pocket money for those outings. But I couldn't stay silent and watch our household expenses increase, so I brought it up with him several times. At first, he would say, "It's okay, the entertaining expenses are covered by the company. The money comes back." But gradually, he started giving specific reasons, like, "Today is a colleague's birthday," or "I can't miss a promotion celebration." It became harder for me to object. My husband had a close group of friends at work. I heard from a university friend who also landed a job there. That friend was the one who had a crush on him and led us to join the club. She was already married and said it was a coincidence that she ended up working at the same place as my husband. When I mentioned my husband was Anthony, she had to think for a moment. Who was that again? It seems she had completely forgotten about the man she once eagerly pursued. She told me a lot about my husband. He was always with his close-knit group, and there were no other women involved, which was a relief. But the weekly spending on drinks was a problem. I kept asking him to cut back on the drinking sessions, but he couldn't refuse invitations from dear friends. Even when I argued about the expenses, he only suggested reducing the amount spent per occasion instead of not going at all. Looking back, we should have had a serious discussion about this early in our marriage. As time went on, things became more ambiguous, and I started to give up. My husband stopped mentioning his outings unless I asked, and it seemed like he had created his own rule of going out on weekends. Approaching his 30s, he hadn't changed his living habits from his student days, only capable of leaving his clothes on the floor. I had gotten used to taking care of him, so even though I was frustrated, I stopped bringing it up. I figured if we were going to fight about it, I might as well let him do what he wanted. Then one day, my husband mentioned he would be joining the company's retreat. A company retreat when it's not even a long weekend? If it were during a long weekend, everywhere would be crowded. The idea is to go at a different time so we can actually relax. He explained. I'm okay with him participating in the trip since he's been working hard. But the cost is what worries me. Even if the travel expenses are covered, things like meals and souvenirs will likely be out of pocket. With the warmer days, his drinking outings have become more frequent, and our expenses have grown more severe. And there's something about this retreat that's bothering me. Maybe you should skip it? You've been really busy lately and must be exhausted. It's a work obligation, and everyone's expected to go, he said, though his expression softened. He seemed really keen on going. For once, I pressed harder. Are you sure you want to go? We can't afford to spend more right now with all our bills. Thinking I was angry, he raised his voice. Are you seriously telling me not to go now? You say we don't have money, but it's all coming from my salary anyway. Don't act so high and mighty. It seems he made me a housewife just to say this, thinking it would silence me. True to form, I stayed quiet, and he, feeling reassured, said, You've had fewer friends since we got married. You're just jealous of me. I was irritated but too dismayed to retort. Who's been sacrificing social ties to keep this household running? I was on the verge of saying it but lacked the energy to bother. Fine, do whatever you want. At that, he momentarily looked triumphant. Then patronizingly patted my head, asking sweetly, What would you like for a souvenir? Ever since college, he's believed his wife adores him. Having been quite popular, his self-esteem seems quite inflated. His life has been so charmed that his lack of malice is actually more problematic. Turns out, the trip was set for the very next day, and he left early in the morning, full of enthusiasm. Surprisingly, he managed all the preparations himself, dragging along a neat suitcase he must have bought at some point. During the week he was gone, I had a peaceful time. It made me wonder if this is how it feels when your children are grown and independent. I've essentially been raising a large child for years. Taking a week off won't hurt. By the time he returned from the trip, it was already late at night. He seemed a bit worn out, probably from taking the night bus. "Were you okay this week?" I was worried about the bills and everything. "Yeah, everything was fine," I assured him. "See, I told you there was nothing to worry about. I'll start earning again from next week, so don't fret," he said, perhaps a bit smugly after drinking on the bus. I was annoyed but didn't show it, simply replying, "Maybe so," and tried to leave. However, he didn't like my response and shouted after me, "What's with that attitude?" As he's gotten older, he tends to get angry suddenly when he got drunk. I was surprised at first, but now it's become routine whenever he returns from drinking. "I'm tired too. Please don't raise your voice. Make sure all your laundry is in the basket, and if there's trash, sort it out. I'm going to bed now." He said something else, but I quickly went to bed. The next morning, his phone rang early. Annoyed, he got up, glanced at the screen, and clicked his tongue. I took the day off. What now? It was his office calling. He got up, left the bedroom, and I secretly watched, somewhat predicting what would happen next. After a few minutes on the phone, he changed into a suit and left the house. Wondering when he would come back, I woke up to wash the pile of clothes he had left behind. It was a few hours later when my husband returned. As soon as he entered the house, he called out to me, shouting, "This is all your fault for causing such a mess." Let's rewind to a week ago. In the evening, after hearing about the company retreat from my husband, I immediately called a friend. I had never heard about the retreat from her, despite our daily chats. When she said, "There's no company retreat," I realized something. My husband probably lied about going on the retreat to avoid being stopped by me. Perhaps to hang out with those colleagues, or maybe even to meet another woman. Either way, I no longer cared. Who would sympathize with a husband who lies and abandons his wife to go out? Before I knew it, I was asking my friend for a favor. To report this to the company. After all, we were barely making ends meet. There was no way he could afford a week-long trip on his own. If the retreat was a lie, where would the money for it come from? Though I didn't want to think about it, my friend and I eventually came to the same conclusion. I told her it would be great if she could say she was the one who leaked it. My friend seemed to have acted immediately. The company waited for them to return from their trip and then called them in. During that time, the company thoroughly investigated them. What followed was a series of records of misused expenses being uncovered. Their desks were found to be filled with blank receipts from various stores. They likely used these to falsely claim expenses for their numerous drinking outings, applying this money towards their trip this time. This was mostly accurate, and they admitted their guilt when called in. "We plan to submit it as a business expense for the retreat," they confessed. Everyone involved had repeatedly misused expenses, leading to a total loss of around several $1,000s. Naturally, they were all dismissed and faced claims for restitution and damages. Furious upon returning, my husband yelled at me, "This is all your fault." I don't know why he thought I reported him to the company. Since my friend was the one who actually reported it, I was relieved she wouldn't be harmed. Ignoring his own actions, he raged in front of me, where I presented him with the already filled-out divorce papers. Getting caught was your own fault. That's why I told you to cancel the trip. But if you've been doing this all along, it was bound to come out sooner or later. Though he glared and trembled, he snatched the divorce papers, saying, "I'm better off without a snitching, spiteful wife," and threw them at me as if to slap me with them. Good, this makes things easier. Goodbye, then. With that, I left, carrying the bags I had already packed. He kept his back to me until I left the room, perhaps out of pride. I caught a glimpse of his graying hairline and felt a twinge of sadness for the Anthony I once admired. Then, I headed to the small apartment I had already arranged. I never thought I'd use my savings from a year of work this way. Although I had some savings, the initial moving costs significantly depleted. Now, I need to find a job. After being a housewife for so long without any particular qualifications, I wonder if I can find work. At first, any job will do. I decided to work and become independent. After informing my parents about the finalized divorce, I also contacted my friend. One of them, concerned about me, suggested we meet up after a long time. That's right. Now that I'm divorced, I should live my life freely. I won't be forced to do household chores for anyone else. I just need to take care of myself. What a freedom. The next day, after spending a day unpacking, I immediately started looking for a job. I found some listings on job sites, prepared my applications, and went for interviews. Before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed while I was busy with this routine. The calls from my ex-husband became more frequent. On the other end of the phone, Anthony alternated between anger and tears. Having relied on me for household and financial management, he had run out of money within these 2 weeks. He had no savings habit, so his account was completely empty. With several bills due at the end of the month, Anthony asked me for a loan, saying, "We're divorced, so I have no obligation to pay for you. If you really need a loan, are you okay with interest? Why do you have spare money? Aren't you ashamed to have been saving secretly just for yourself? This calls for a redistribution of property. Come back right now." Anthony, infuriated by my advantageous position, screamed so loudly the audio cracked. "It's fine if you want to claim a redistribution of property, but that process is complicated and time-consuming. By the time you get it sorted, the month's end will be here. Then come over right now and give me half. Or remarry me for a while and take care of me." Frustrated by Anthony's self-centered demands, I ended the call without a word. I realized there was no getting through to him, and the thought of still being liked by him became physically repulsive. Of course, after setting my phone to block his calls, they stopped. Eventually, I secured a job at a food factory. Wanting to avoid any trouble with Anthony, I opted for a behind-the-scenes role. Working and sweating after a long break felt refreshing. Being single again, I reconnected with friends from my student days and started going out more. After a few meetings, my friends said I looked rejuvenated, and I felt a profound sense of fulfillment in my daily life. "I never imagined our house could be burgled," I muttered to myself. The day after our home was burglarized, I still couldn't grasp that it had happened to me. I was reflecting on my inability to act at the moment. Mother-in-law, concerned, hurriedly asked, "Did you see the face of the culprit?" However, an event that would save me from despair happened shortly after. My name is Mia. I'm 29 years old. I was married to Thomas, a year older than me, and we had a reasonably happy life. But recently, after losing Dad, I've felt a gaping hole in my heart. Dad gave me not only a lot of love, but also many lessons. Even after retiring, Dad never felt left behind by the current times. I remember him studying about money with enthusiasm, even as many others settled into a quiet life receiving their pensions. Dad continued to learn new things after retirement, never stopping despite my concerns. Worried, I suggested, "Dad, you've retired from your job. Why not take a break for a while?" But Dad, with a cheerful smile, replied, "I've worked hard for many years and can't suddenly stop. I'm just doing things I'm interested in as my way of preventing dementia. Don't worry about me." Half in disbelief yet fond of Dad, I watched over his actions, thinking if it's what he likes, then it's okay. When I got married, Dad was overjoyed, saying, "I'm relieved to see Mia so happy. I have no regrets in this world," with tears in his eyes. My husband and I, telling Dad to stop joking, laughed together. A few days after the wedding, Dad and I spent some father-daughter time together, during which he said, "Mia, I'll leave you plenty of money, so don't worry about finances even if you start a family." To which I replied, "Dad, I appreciate the thought, but don't waste your retirement like that. Actually, I want to take you on a trip. Let's enjoy some leisure time together." I thought I'd finally be able to show my gratitude. However, Dad, who had been so vibrant, suddenly passed away, and I was left feeling hopeless after the funeral. Seeing Dad's inheritance was shocking. Gold bars? I was speechless at the sight, not knowing their significance initially. But I soon learned of Dad's intentions. Research revealed that gold bars hold their value over years, hardly depreciating. Dad left me a lasting fortune to secure my future even decades after his passing. Reflecting on it, Dad often said, "In today's world, the value of money can fluctuate, so Mia, you should do your research." At the time, I dismissed it due to daily busyness. Realizing now that Dad converted his wealth into gold bars to leave it for me, I couldn't be more grateful. Wanting to honor Dad's wishes, I kept the gold bars hidden even from my husband. Yet, someone had the audacity to say, "I heard Mia's dad passed away, so you must have gotten a hefty inheritance, right? Share some with me." Shockingly, these words came from my husband. His words were so unthinkable that I didn't respond. Then he said, "I've been feeling unmotivated at work and thinking of quitting to make a quick fortune. Winning a little makes me feel recognized, and it'd be a relief for you too if I became wealthy, right?" Realizing what he meant, I asked, "Is that some kind of gambling?" He boasted, "Well, kinda. But I'm not like those unsuccessful gamblers." I thought about discussing and deciding together on necessities like a house or car for us as a couple. But then, my husband started saying, "I also want to upgrade everything I wear to high-end brands." I was speechless, not knowing he was this kind of person. I decided to keep it stored in a safe that only I could access. To me, what Dad left behind is as precious as life itself. I couldn't bear to squander it on my husband's whims, so I refused. However, since he wouldn't give up asking, I took the bold step of consulting my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law had been supportive since I was dating her son and continued to be so after marriage. After I told mother-in-law everything, she listened, nodding, and said, "I'm sorry about this. Let's have a discussion, the three of us." When I mentioned to my husband that we would discuss Dad's inheritance with mother-in-law, he seemed thrilled, thinking his wishes would finally be met. Later, eager to state his case, he said, "Given the uncertainty of lifelong employment, I've been working on a side hustle. I'd like a share of Mia's dad's inheritance to make it successful." A side hustle, or rather, gambling. I almost blurted out, but mother-in-law immediately mentioned, I saw you entering a slot shop recently." The room froze at her words. My husband made feeble excuses but was asked by mother-in-law to show his savings, revealing almost nothing. Mother-in-law scolded him with an expression I'd never seen before. "Thomas, enough is enough. Work properly without complaints. If you target me as Dad's inheritance again, I won't forgive you." Yet, my husband responded with dissatisfaction. "Okay, I get it. But you're both taking a joke too seriously," I said. "There are things you can joke about and things you shouldn't." To which mother-in-law added, "Exactly. Haven't I always taught you that?" Embarrassed by the scolding from both of us, he left for home as if fleeing. I thanked mother-in-law, saying, "I couldn't have persuaded him alone." "Thank you," mother-in-law replied. "It's okay. Thank you for marrying such a son." In return, she thanked me. Then she muttered, "Thomas really is a handful." I didn't miss a word and asked, "Does that mean Stephen too?" Mother-in-law nodded slightly. I knew Thomas had a brother named Stephen but hadn't really spoken to him. We only greeted each other during a family meeting, and I remembered his voice being deeper than Thomas's. I regret not having tried to interact more, not knowing how to approach him. I took this opportunity to ask mother-in-law about brother-in-law. Mother-in-law said, "Stephen quits jobs as soon as he dislikes them and is currently freelancing. I'm worried about his future. I wish he would settle into a stable job, but job changes are becoming more common these days." Mother-in-law continued, but it seemed brother-in-law's reasons for quitting were somewhat trivial. Mother-in-law had been worried for a long time. I couldn't admonish brother-in-law myself, so I just listened to mother-in-law, who had been worried for a long time. Worried about mother-in-law's well-being, I bought a concert ticket for her too. And we decided to go together, hoping it would help her relax and refresh. On the day of the concert, my husband had already left for work, and I was looking forward to it with mother-in-law. But after walking a bit, I felt like I had forgotten something. After rummaging through my bag, I realized in horror. "I'm sorry. I forgot the most important thing, the tickets." When I told mother-in-law, she surprisingly said, "It's okay. We can go back and make it. Let's go together." "I'm sorry. Please wait here. I'll run back and get them." And ran off. I burst through the front door, heading straight for the room. There, in front of the safe containing Dad's inheritance, I encountered a person clad entirely in black. In my haste, and unsure if I was dreaming or awake, I screamed. The burglar shoved me aside and fled. Although I was confused about what was happening, I confirmed the burglar had taken the gold bars, and immediately called the police. I explained everything to mother-in-law at home and apologized. When the police arrived and I was describing the burglar's features and the situation, mother-in-law rushed over to my house, anxiously asking, "Mia, are you okay? You really encountered the burglar? Did you see his face? Did you tell the police everything?" I shook my head in despair. While mother-in-law was saddened, I reassured her. "It's okay. The police are here, taking my statement." Then, looking at the safe, mother-in-law lamented, "Oh, what a mess." I hadn't shared the code or hiding place with anyone. Although it was only until I could deposit them in a bank safe, the safe I had chosen was among the most secure available commercially. Supposedly impervious to ordinary household tools. The police, having seen the scene, speculated that the burglar either had specialized tools or was an experienced criminal. I continued to provide details to the police. Afterwards, I told mother-in-law, "The investigation will start now and it might take a while, so please go back home and rest for now. I'm sorry for today. Mother-in-law responded. All right. I don't want to be in the way. I'll contact you later. And left. However, mother-in-law returned about an hour later, drenched in sweat. Mia, listen! She exclaimed, causing me and the police to freeze and turn towards her. What happened? I asked, to which mother-in-law revealed. When I went back, I saw Stephen entering his room with something that looked like gold bars. I thought I should get evidence before confronting him, so I didn't question him right away. It's about your dad's inheritance, isn't it? When mother-in-law mentioned that, I immediately responded. It's the gold bars. Mother-in-law said. Understood. Now, listen to this. And played a recording from her phone for us. I managed to get the stuff out, but Mia caught me at the worst possible moment. Really screwed up there. And knowing how she showed up just then. The recording clearly captured someone speaking foully. That low and distinctive voice was unmistakably Stephen's. I was certain of it. It also captured a strategy session over the phone with my husband on how to deceive the police if questioned. After recording the scene, mother-in-law, though shocked, submitted it to the police. Apologizing, mother-in-law said, I'm really sorry for causing you distress. I just thought I had to secure some evidence. I quickly assured her. You did nothing wrong, Thomas's mom. My primary concern is catching the burglar as soon as possible. Your evidence was incredibly helpful. Thank you. The police immediately headed to brother-in-law's location, where he confessed to conspiring with my husband. Thomas wanted the gold bars to pay compensation to his mistress's husband. Brother-in-law revealed. Mother-in-law and I were stunned, blurting out. What? An affair? Nodding, brother-in-law continued. My brother was trying to convince Mia to hand over the gold bars to cover up the affair without it being discovered. Hearing this, I remarked. Thomas said he was gambling, thinking that would convince me? Brother-in-law replied. He started gambling on his own, hoping to pay off without any help. But as his savings dwindled, he became desperate and tried to persuade Mia to give him the gold bars. That explains the time my husband begged for money. I thought to myself. When I asked, and then? Brother-in-law continued. A few days later, when Mia wouldn't agree, Thomas called again, saying we'd execute the burglary plan on a day Mia was out. He promised me a share if we succeeded, so I followed his instructions and committed the crime. Hearing this, I realized my husband had his brother do it, likely because he knew his own physique and mannerisms might give him away. Not only was Dad's inheritance stolen, but I also learned of the affair, and I decided it was over with my husband. Just as brother-in-law had confessed, my husband returned home. Mia, I've heard about what happened. Are you hurt? Everything okay? He asked, putting on a poorly acted concern. Unaware of brother-in-law's confession, my husband was puzzled by the cold looks around him, saying, Well, losing Dad's precious inheritance is sad, but what's lost is lost, right? We can rebuild our fortune together from scratch. Trying to dismiss the police and grab my shoulder. Disgusted by my husband after hearing everything from brother-in-law, I pushed him away, saying, Stop. Don't touch me. Surprised, he looked at me. Mia, what's gotten into you all of a sudden? You're scared of the police, right? Let's talk, just the two of us. Trying to drag me outside forcibly. I resisted, but he was too strong and dragged me along, leaving me feeling helpless. The police intervened. She said to stop, so let her go. Restraining him with several officers. Everything from the burglary plan to your affair has been exposed. The police informed him as he struggled and attempted to flee. However, his escape was futile and he was caught. Thus, the gold bars were safely returned to me. The day after the burglary incident, still in disbelief, I muttered to myself, "I never imagined a burglary could happen at my house." Unforgivable actions by my husband and brother-in-law led me to file a lawsuit immediately. While my husband received a suspended sentence, brother-in-law, having no job and supporting himself through crime, was found guilty of other offenses and received a prison sentence. Brother-in-law had the tools for the job, and it wasn't his first time breaking safes. I hoped this would be a wake-up call for others involved in crime. Mother-in-law, devastated by her son's actions, tearfully said, "I hope they fully pay for their crimes." My heart ached, but preventing further victims was necessary. I demanded compensation from my husband and his mistress. My husband, now facing a slew of misfortunes, desperately pleaded, "Let's not divorce, Mia. It was all my fault. I only love you. I can't pay the compensation." Resorting to tears, but I felt no sympathy and refused to forgive him. "How are you planning to cash them? Did you really think you could just walk into a shop with a large amount of gold bars and smoothly sell them? You need a personal number to sell something of this size. Did you think you could just use the inheritance I received as you pleased?" Stumbling over his words, my husband admitted, "When you put it that way, yes." He knew he had no right to decide how to use my inherited wealth. Blinded by immediate financial gain, you didn't think through the consequences of your actions. I told him, and he could only look down, silent. Searching for a way to break into such a sturdy safe, committing a crime to get his hands on it. Yet not thinking about the aftermath at all was absurdly foolish. I announced our divorce right there and then. Finally, after all the procedures were completed, I felt relieved. The move, funded by my husband's compensation, was completed. I became a free person. As for my husband, his misdeeds were exposed to his company, leading to his job loss. Disowned by his family and with no savings, he began doing day labor to pay the compensation. Struggling with his deteriorating life and failing workplace relationships. It seems he planned another burglary due to being unable to cope with these challenges. Naturally, without any accomplices, he was caught by the returning residents and beaten. "It's the second time. Please have mercy," my husband reportedly pleaded, but the residents mercilessly called the police. He was sentenced to prison. This time, he truly couldn't return to a normal life. The burglary occurred near my previous home, and I heard the story directly from the neighbor involved. After the first burglary at my former house, my husband became well known throughout the neighborhood. Without the means to go far, he committed another crime nearby. Finally, we parted with, "It's a dangerous world out there. Let's both be careful. Take care." After the trial, mother-in-law was mentally damaged and struggled to recover. So, I frequently visited and maintained our relationship. I wanted to do everything I could for mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me. Thanks to my care, mother-in-law gradually recovered. We still have a good relationship today. I want to live my life gratefully for the peaceful days and the people around me, hoping for this tranquility to last forever. I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement fund. You can go live in a home. Understood. These were the last words spoken to me by my husband of 35 years on the final day of our marriage. Rather than cherishing the effort I put into raising our children, caring for our parents, and working tirelessly, he chose to cast me aside in the most humiliating way. What was the meaning of my 35 years of dedication? He left all responsibilities to me while he enjoyed nights out. Never once did he express gratitude, as if my efforts were expected. Looking back, I'm amazed at how long I endured this treatment. But now, it's time for me to live my life in my golden years. I thought it was my husband's turn to be miserable. My name is Grace, I'm 60 years old. Working part-time at a food company's factory. My husband's name is Robert, he's 65. We met through a mutual acquaintance and got married when I was 25, marking 35 years of marriage. Our relationship began with what was then popular group dating, and after several dates, influenced by our friends, we started dating. As we met more and more, we both started to think that if we were to marry anyone, it would be each other. Getting married felt like a natural progression. Starting our life together, I realized Robert had no savings. In the beginning, we lived in a small apartment, with most living expenses covered by me. Robert's low income made me anxious about our future, so I continued working, sometimes unable to manage household chores due to overtime. You're late. I'm hungry already. Did you wait? You could have eaten first. How can I eat when there's nothing to eat? Robert often came home earlier than me, as he rarely worked overtime, yet he never helped with household chores. Isn't it a woman's job to do the housework? We're not in that era anymore. That time was when women were starting to make significant strides in the workforce. The term career woman was becoming common, but Robert insisted that household duties were a woman's job, as if stuck in an outdated mindset. I would have preferred being a housewife if it were financially feasible. Balancing work and home life is what defines the modern woman. Our situation wasn't exactly the stereotype of a henpecked husband, but reflected Robert's tendency to interpret things in a way that suited him. While I was constrained, Robert often went out drinking. If you're going to be late, at least let me know. Quit nagging. It's my time. I can do what I want. His tone grew even harsher when he came home drunk. While I couldn't freely use my own money or time, Robert enjoyed his. I feel like I'm always getting the short end of the stick. Early in our marriage, I was so frustrated that I considered divorce. But when I confided in my mom, she strongly advised against it. I also worried about societal judgment and lacked the courage to leave. Living together meant acknowledging both the good and the bad, I constantly reminded myself. After my husband Robert received his paycheck, he'd either go out for drinks or just enjoy his freedom. He never considered taking on a side job or working overtime. Instead, he'd leave work on time, choosing between heading out for drinks or coming home. When he did come home and found me not there, he'd complain. I hate coming home to an empty house. Seeing the lights off through the window stresses me out. But sometimes I have to work late. I'd respond, "What's the point of you working overtime? You should find a different job." He'd retort. Robert took it upon himself to call my workplace and suggested they let me go. Whether my boss wanted to avoid getting involved in whatever was happening or had already wanted to fire me, I was encouraged to resign. It became uncomfortable to stay, so I left a job that was hard to get in the first place. Now, I was faced with the daunting task of job hunting again. Having already left 2 companies, my resume wasn't passing the initial screenings. In a panic, why not work part-time? I'm working full-time anyway, Robert casually mentioned. I wasn't particularly career-driven, so I didn't cling to my aspirations. However, I was worried if we could manage on Robert's salary alone. So, I took on 2 part-time jobs. One as an early morning cleaner and another as a supermarket cashier. I'd even work overtime at the supermarket on days I knew Robert would be home late. I made sure to be home when Robert was around and worked diligently when he wasn't. I endured years of this routine, convincing myself that Robert needed me. I found his desire to have me home when he returned somewhat endearing at the time. A year into our marriage, I gave birth to our first son. Our apartment is getting too cramped. Yeah, the kid will want his own room when he's older, and he might even want siblings. Around that time, Robert's mom, Karen, who was a divorced single mother, suggested we live together. Probably, she felt lonely after Robert, her only child, left home. It's all positives, right? We won't have to pay rent, Robert said, likely echoing Karen's words. I wanted some time to think it over. Mom's already getting things ready, he pressed, revealing that a room for our son was already being prepared, complete with new wallpaper. I was shocked at how far they had progressed with their plans without me. Wanting to continue working part-time, I agreed, albeit a bit lightly. A decision I would soon regret. Karen seemed to have it out for me, delivering daily doses of sarcasm. It's sad for the child to see his mom work so much. I can't believe this. It wasn't like this in my time, she'd say. Karen had never worked. After her divorce, she relied on her parents to raise Robert. Karen's family was somewhat wealthy, so there was money. Now, it seems she's living off a small inheritance and a meager pension. Though her spending habits seemed a bit extravagant. Her kindness extended to her hobbies and her son and grandson, but never to me. Meals were prepared without considering me, and I was often left behind on outings. I was thankful she looked after my grandson, though. With Karen taking over the household, Robert told me, "You can work full-time now, overtime included." What? Why all of a sudden? I asked, baffled. "Since Mom's here, you can go work," he said. I thought to myself, what a selfish person he is. It was then I realized that when he said he wanted me to stay home, it wasn't because he wanted me there, but rather someone to take care of his needs. I started my mornings by dropping off our child at the childcare center, then heading to work as a temp. Fortunately, Karen was always willing to pick up our grandson, which allowed me to rely on her for the return trips. Being able to work overtime without complaints was a relief. This routine continued for about 10 years until Karen began to act strangely. "Who are you?" "A thief, I guess." "Robert, call the police." "No, it's me, Grace." Karen had developed Alzheimer's disease and saw me as a complete enemy. She increasingly failed to recognize Robert and our son as well. One day, while wandering, she was involved in a traffic accident and became bedridden. "This is your fault. You're responsible for taking care of her," Robert blamed me. "How is it my fault? You shouldn't be working late nights. But you're the one who said I could work." Our arguments became endless. I considered leaving with our son, but couldn't abandon Karen. Besides, our son loved both Robert and Karen too much for me to separate them. Karen, who never accepted me as family, complained daily while I cared for her. When I confided in Robert, he dismissed it simply. "She has dementia, what can you do?" Eventually, I quit my job and became increasingly isolated. I had hoped Karen might become kinder to me, thinking I was a stranger due to her condition, but that was wishful thinking. She must have inherently disliked me. Yet, she was still an important grandmother to our son. I cared for Karen alone until she passed away. After Karen's death and our son becoming independent, only Robert and I remained. With Robert's retirement coming up next year, I looked forward to traveling together and exploring new places. However, Robert presented me with something shocking. "Mine's already filled out. Just sign and submit it." "A divorce application?" "It's obvious if you look at it. You're really dumb, you know. That's what's been so annoying." I felt as if I'd been punched. It felt like I might collapse right there. "Why? Did I do something to deserve a divorce? If I had to say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you." "What do you mean?" Robert looked at me with a scornful smile and dropped a bombshell. I want to marry someone else. And then, there was Robert's mistress. It seems their affair had been going on for years. The mistress was 20 years younger than me. Even when I was taking care of Mom and raising our child, you were cheating? That's about right. The anger inside me was about to explode. While I endured Karen's harsh words, took care of our child, and suffered loneliness all by myself, Robert was out having fun with his mistress. I wish I never knew this. You've been deceiving me all along. I'll never forgive you. And what are you going to do about it? Like you could do anything. Robert taunted me with a smirk. So, you're divorcing me to be with her? That's right. She's much younger than you. Understood. I'll sign the divorce papers. But just so you know, I'll be seeking compensation from both of you. Fine by me. I'll pay whatever amount. I've got Mom's inheritance, after all. Oh, but just so you know, I'm not splitting any property with you. I took a moment to think. I had some savings of my own, which I didn't want Robert or his mistress to get their hands on. Okay, I'll settle for the compensation. In return, we don't split my assets either. Robert burst out laughing at that. Your money isn't worth much anyway. I don't need it. We signed the documents in the presence of lawyers, agreeing not to pursue a division of property but to settle on a compensation claim. I received $30,000, which seemed to be paid out in a lump sum from Karen's estate. He probably wanted to start his new life with his mistress as quickly as possible, resolving any messy ties with money. After the lawyer left, I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement funds. You can go live in a home, Robert said. And so, I did end up moving into a facility. Not because Robert told me to, but because it seemed like a more enjoyable way to spend my retirement. The house was originally Robert's family home, and I had nowhere else to live. My sister and her husband were living in my family home, and I didn't want to impose on my son and his wife. I knew Robert had no savings, so dividing property would have been pointless. I preferred to get the divorce over with quickly and was confident I could make it on my own from now on. Robert was the heir to Karen's estate, and the compensation was enough for me. Months later, Robert showed up at the facility, though I hadn't given him my current address. He wasn't supposed to know I had moved into the facility. He must have used some agency to find me. I wondered what he could possibly want after all this time. There were other residents at the facility, so I asked him to wait on the outdoor terrace. Seeing Robert sitting there, looking around, I felt a sense of pity. What had I ever seen in this man to marry him? It was a mystery even to myself. Sorry to keep you waiting. What do you want? What's all this about? Robert confronted me without a greeting, clearly shocked. I played dumb, knowing full well why he was surprised. Why are you here all of a sudden? How did you find me? It took me forever to track you down since you wouldn't contact me. You didn't tell our son either, did you? He had no idea. I didn't want to bother him, as he has his own family now. But that doesn't answer my question. How did you find out about this place? I hired a detective. When I mentioned I needed to contact you about the compensation, they found you. Having an ex-husband is quite handy. So, he had gone through an agency after all. Which detective agency was it? I was furious at the breach of privacy, but kept my cool. More importantly, how can someone like you afford to stay in such a luxurious facility? That was what Robert was astonished about. After our divorce, I had moved into a high-end facility that we had once considered for our retirement. It wasn't your typical nursing home, but more of a luxury apartment complex with an attached hospital. There was also a dining hall run by a nutritionist, and I spent my days enjoying the company of other residents and helpers. You could be on your own if you wished, and someone would check on each room daily to ensure no one had fallen. Each room was equipped with an emergency call button for immediate assistance. I heard this place costs $1 million? How do you have that kind of money? Actually, I've been investing for the past 35 years, ever since we got married. I wanted to ensure we could enjoy our retirement together. I had been laid off during a recession and struggled to find a new job, which drained my savings and filled me with anxiety. Understanding the unpredictability of life, I realized that saving money wasn't enough and started learning about investments. I didn't want to seem greedy, so I never told Robert, whom I was dating at the time. I began investing modestly. After we got married, my desire for us to enjoy good food and travel in our retirement grew stronger, prompting me to invest more seriously. Since we both worked, I gradually invested my earnings, sacrificing outings with friends, delicious meals, shopping, and vacations, putting all my disposable income into investments. After 35 years of consistent investing, I amassed a significant fortune, partly because I started right when the economy was down. When I shared this, Robert claimed, "Then that money is mine too." I had anticipated he would say something like that. "Sorry, but you have no claim to my money." "Why not? I'm your ex-husband. It should be part of my assets too." "You renounced any claim to my assets in front of our lawyers. Have you forgotten already?" "Damn, that's why you insisted on a lawyer. You tricked me." "Who's been deceiving whom all along?" Robert's face twisted in frustration. Realizing this conversation was a waste of time, I urged him to leave. "No way. I'm not leaving. I'll live here too." I was speechless with disbelief. Shortly after, a security guard arrived, prompted by another resident who noticed my distress and escorted Robert out. Due to his harassing behavior, Robert was banned from the facility and added to the blacklist. Curious about his persistence, I contacted our son, who revealed that Robert was in debt. After our divorce, Robert planned to marry his mistress. However, she became furious upon learning about the compensation he paid me. To appease her, Robert lavished her with gifts. But she eventually left him for a younger man without marrying him. "Are you dumping me after all I've spent on you?" It was too late for regrets. The mistress had moved on, losing interest in a now penniless Robert. It turns out she was using Robert as a convenient source of money, likely having always preferred the younger man. I couldn't believe a woman 20 years younger would seriously consider marrying someone like Robert. It seems he was the only one who truly believed in his affair turning into marriage, which must have been a huge shock to him. After donating all of his inheritance to his mistress and accumulating debt, Robert ended up alone in a house that was over 70 years old. The house was in bad shape, with many parts broken and no money for repairs. He now lives alone in a leaky home. My son expressed no interest in helping him. Recently, a community worker visited, asking Robert to at least repair the exterior walls because it was affecting the neighboring house. Robert's angry outburst over this request led to a police incident. My son had to pick up his father from the police station, where he told Robert they were through. "You're abandoning me too?" Robert cried, clinging to his son, who shook him off. Discarded by his son, I thought how pitiful Robert was. After the incident with the police, he became a pariah in the neighborhood, spending his weekends indoors. After telling me about Robert's current situation, my son asked me to keep in touch occasionally. I was touched that he cared. Sometime after talking to my son, I received a call from Robert. Ignoring it, he then called the facility directly. Such persistence. The staff were worried for me. I decided to answer just once. "I just need a little money." "I refuse." "Don't you have a pension?" Robert was supposed to have recently retired, so his claim of having no money seemed like a lie. "I didn't get anything." "Don't lie. You received a pension, didn't you? I got fired just before retirement because of the affair. Turns out, Robert was fired just short of retirement. Apparently, his mistress was a coworker. After breaking up, Robert's stalking scared her into reporting him to their employer. Ultimately, his affair was exposed, leading to his dismissal without a pension. His stalking and the resulting police involvement also became a problem. I felt no sympathy for his story. I asked the facility staff to call the police if he contacted again. When Robert realized he couldn't reach me by phone, he resorted to sending letters. The letter began with, "I want to see you again. I'm lonely." But towards the end, "I need some money." The content changed to things like that. "I think he's struggling." There was a time I inadvertently laughed. I forgot which letter it was, but the ink was slightly smeared. It looked like it was from tears, but I suspect it was just water. I wondered what the point of such a performance was. Truly, it must be hard for him. The letters stopped after about a year when I didn't respond. Years passed, and I had completely forgotten about Robert. Then one day, while I was shopping, a man in dirty clothes, emitting a slight odor, approached me. It was undoubtedly Robert, now thin with almost entirely white hair and a bushy beard. "Isn't that Grace?" I was shocked by how much he had changed. "I've finally found you. Let's start over. You're all I have." Feeling frightened as Robert grabbed my hand, he insisted. "It's me, Robert. You recognize me, right?" "I do, but we are strangers now. Goodbye." As I tried to leave, Robert blocked my path, looking at me with desperate eyes, then suddenly begged, "Please, come back home. I don't want to be alone in my old age. You were the one who drove me away. Have you forgotten?" "I'm apologizing, aren't I?" "Sorry isn't enough. I've moved on. You should too." Despite my attempts to ignore him, Robert kept chasing me, repeatedly bowing his head. "We're divorced, Robert. Stop this." "I was wrong. You were the most important thing to me. I've realized that now." "It's too late." As I tried to distance myself, Robert grabbed my arm. Then, "Could you let go of her, please?" "Who are you?" "This is my husband." "What?" I had remarried. My new husband's name is Matthew. 2 years my senior. We got close in the same facility where we met. It was Matthew who had called security when Robert visited. This was shared with me by another resident, and I was drawn to their considerate and kind nature. We naturally spent more time together and decided to marry. Despite wondering if it was odd to remarry at our age, we chose happiness for our final chapter. Matthew pulled Robert away from me. "You remarried?" "Yes. So please leave me alone." "So that's how it is." Robert was visibly shaken. I was worried he might lash out at Matthew in anger, but he had no energy left. Instead, he collapsed, crying on the spot. "Please stop. It's embarrassing." "Shut up! Don't bother me!" Robert cried unabashedly, as onlookers watched from afar. I thought it was a pitiful sight. A grown man, crouched down on the street, crying. Is this something a person can do without shame? Or perhaps, am I being tested? "Grace, let's go." "Yes." Encouraged by Matthew, I left the scene behind. Since then, Robert has not appeared before me again. According to my son, Robert still lives in the same old, unrepaired house. Unable to properly take care of household chores and accumulating garbage to the point of generating complaints for the smell. My son has been inconvenienced by repeated contacts every time there's a complaint. Despite attempts to reason with him, my son finally lost his patience. In front of a city official, "He's not my son," Robert declared. Following that, Attempts to contact my son ceased when Robert reacted angrily to them. It seems the authorities have also given up, deeming any effort futile. Truly, Robert has become a neighborhood nuisance. However, that's no longer my concern. Ultimately, abandoned by everyone, Robert lives in isolation. If only I hadn't started that affair. My son mentioned hearing Robert say. But to me, it's not about the affair. It's the price of living selfishly, without regard for others, now coming back to haunt him. It's his responsibility. Humans may be prone to making regrettable decisions, but continuing without reflection for over 70 years is merely pitiful. Robert will likely never realize this, having destroyed his own future. The task of repairing it falls to him, though he may lack the strength to do so. I hope he faces his actions and lives on. I'm thankful to Robert. Had I continued to rely on him, my later years would have been disastrous. His decision to divorce because of his affair allowed me to live my life. I've started to communicate more frequently with my son. It was a turning point when Emily, my son's wife, who mediated between us, said, "Please don't worry about it." That moment made me realize how much of my life was spent overly accommodating others. I had distanced myself from my adult son to avoid burdening him. Shocked when he expressed his dislike for his grandmother and father from childhood. Aware of the mistreatment and infidelity, I've resolved to live the rest of my life without such undue consideration. Now, my son's family and grandchildren visit, allowing us to make up for lost time in conversation. My son seems a bit shy, but it's strange how he can talk naturally when his wife and grandchildren are around. He has accepted Matthew, and to my grandchildren, Matthew is like a real grandfather. Currently, Matthew and I enjoy our time in the facility, surrounded by friends and content. My priority is health, hoping for a long life.
Are you calling me old, huh? What are you talking about? You're the same age as me, Robert. I don't need to hear this from you.
But seriously, Susan's skin is so much firmer. Hard to believe you two are sisters.
Well, Susan is 10 years younger than me, so of course, there's a difference. Plus, our facial features are different. Somehow, I feel like I drew the short straw.
Drew the short straw with what? Why does my wife have to be the unattractive one?
You sure have the guts to say that to your own wife? Lately, Robert, my husband, has taken to hurling such insults at me every time he comes home from work. He always had a joking tone before, but it got worse after my younger sister Susan, who we hadn't seen in a while, came to visit the other day. I am Margaret, 30 years old. My dad runs a small factory. We were never rich, but we weren't poor either, so we led a decent life. I got married 2 years ago and continued working. Robert was a salesman for one of our company's clients. He wasn't exactly what you'd call an elite, but he seemed kind. I thought I could have a simple, peaceful life with him. Not being one for the limelight, I always believed that a quiet life without any drama was the ultimate happiness. My sister Susan is 10 years younger than me and was still in the 11th grade when I got married. Our family is from Dallas, but after graduating high school, Susan moved to Boston for college and was living alone there. Although Robert and I occasionally visited my parents, 2 years passed without seeing Susan. And then, after a long time, Susan came to visit us. She had grown into a beautiful, sophisticated young woman, perhaps influenced by Boston, and seemed quite flashy. Man, it must be nice to be in a salaried family. Susan didn't like the factory. To her, our dad, who always wore his work clothes and worked from early morning till late at night, seemed poor. She often said she wished she had been born into a regular salaried family. Robert, seeing Susan, completely relaxed and was visibly happy. He never helped with housework, but he went out of his way to take care of Susan, and I couldn't help feeling a bit off about the difference in his attitude toward me.
Susan, you become so beautiful. Just like a model.
Stop it, Robert. You're teasing me.
No, really. You don't look like sisters at all.
Well, I've always been told I don't look like Margaret since I was a kid.
I guess so.
They both agreed, getting carried away in the moment. After that day, Robert's verbal abuse towards me got worse. Every single thing was compared to Susan, which made me feel sick. Plus Susan, who never used to come by, started visiting frequently. Each time, Robert would welcome her warmly, piling chores on me to entertain her. They'd sit on the living room couch, sipping drinks and laughing away. Hey, Margaret, we're running low on drinks. I want something more stylish to drink. Go, buy something, will you? If you want something, go, get it yourself. I'm not your housekeeper.
What are you talking about? Susan's a guest. It's our job to entertain her. So go, buy some drinks.
And you? Just delighted to do so? It's pathetic.
What did you say?
Margaret is just jealous because she's ugly. How about it, Robert? Shall we go shopping together?
Oh, should we? Susan, you're so kind.
And with that, they left and didn't return for 2 or 3 hours. I wondered what they were up to, but I was too busy cleaning up their mess to think too deeply about it. Little did I know, it would lead to such an event. 3 months after Susan started coming over, I came home to find divorce papers with Robert's name on them on the table. We'd never even spoken about divorce before. When I checked the closet, all of Robert's clothes were gone. What's going on? I tried calling Robert, but he didn't answer. Then I got a call from Susan. Yoo-hoo, Margaret.
Sorry, I'm a bit tied up right now.
Tied up? Like, wondering where Robert has gone?
How did you know that?
Actually, I'm with Robert right now.
Are you talking about my husband, Robert? What do you mean?
Well, we've eloped.
Huh?
For a moment, I didn't understand what she was saying. I really pondered what eloping meant. It was a word I should have known for the longest time, yet I couldn't grasp it.
Elope? What's that?
Oh, come on. Elopement is elopement. Forbidden love. You know, Robert and I have run off together on a journey of love.
Are you joking?
Of course, I'm serious.
My husband and sister eloped.
It felt like something out of a cheap romance drama. Not something that would happen to me. My life was supposed to pass by ordinarily without much ado. And above all, that's what I had hoped for more than anyone else. Robert is my husband.
Susan, you are my sister. You two eloping is impossible.
Oh, come on. That's exactly why we eloped. If Robert wasn't your husband, there would be no need for us to run away, right? But you know what they say. The greater the obstacle, the hotter the love burns.
You two think you can do this and get away with it?
But it can't be helped. We're in love.
What about Robert? Is he there? He's not answering my calls.
He doesn't want to talk to you anymore. But since I'm your sister, I went out of my way to let you know. Be grateful.
With that, Susan hung up the phone. No matter how many times I tried to call back, there was no answer. I immediately contacted our parents and my in-laws to report the situation. Both sets of parents were shocked, thinking this must be some kind of bad joke, just like I did. But in reality, they had meticulously planned to elope. Robert had already quit his job, and Susan had submitted her withdrawal notice to the university. Furthermore, Susan had withdrawn all the money from our parents' accounts and even took all the cash that was left at home. It might have been possible to find out where they were by hiring a private investigator. Paul, my father-in-law, offered to cover all the costs to find them and have a talk, but I refused. It was Paul's right to search for them and talk, and the in-laws could do as they pleased, but I never wanted to see Robert's or Susan's face again.
I'm truly sorry. What Robert did is unforgivable.
Paul apologized, bowing deeply to the floor. My dad looked downcast, and both my mom and mother-in-law were in tears. However, the situation was even worse because it involved my sister. Since it was our own family member, it was impossible to comprehend what our parents were feeling. Robert had fled after borrowing money from colleagues and friends who then came to me asking what happened or even came to our house demanding repayment. Every time, I had to explain the situation or apologize, and it left me completely exhausted. Pity was evident in the eyes of Robert's friends, making me feel utterly miserable. Seeing their faces, I thought I couldn't possibly share this embarrassing story with my own friends. My own husband and sister having an affair. What a foolish story this turned out to be. I must have been a fool not to realize until it got to this point. Looking back, there were many signs, yet I never doubted them. It never crossed my mind that people could betray you like this. Not your sister with your husband. Not your husband with your sister. Such tales might be common in the world, but you never expect them to happen to you. While I've told my close friends about the divorce, I still haven't been able to share the painful details. Did Robert have an affair? They'd ask. Well, something like that. I'd respond vaguely. It was much later before I could tell my friends the truth. For a while, I didn't feel like doing anything, and I quit my job and shut myself in, my mental state in shambles. I even thought everyone must be laughing at my disgrace. I went back home, but hearing laughter around me made me stay in my room with my ears covered for days. Eventually, both Robert's parents and mine cut ties with the couple and stopped all communication with them. As time passed, it slowly started to heal my heart. It took a year before I could look people in the eye again, but gradually, I grew tired of causing worry and wearing a gloomy face. Despite doing nothing wrong, I couldn't help but feel the weight of others' gazes on me. While I was wasting my time aimlessly, those two were out there, probably living it up, and it finally struck me how silly I was being. I have every right to enjoy my life too. With that realization, I could finally lift my head and walk proudly again. I'm okay now. Really sorry for worrying you. Both my dad and mom seemed relieved by my words. Looking back, they probably had it much harder than I did. Yet, I worried them so much. After that, I started helping out at my dad's factory. Working there, I could forget the unpleasantness and time seemed to fly by. The memories of those two would occasionally cross my mind, but mostly I was able to leave without recalling them. And so, 20 years passed, and I had nearly forgotten all about them. Dad fell ill and passed away 3 years ago. Out of consideration for me, perhaps he never mentioned Susan's name to the end. But he had such a peaceful look on his face when he passed. It looked to me like he was smiling. I believe he was satisfied with his life, and Mom said the same. Margaret, I think Dad had a fulfilling life because of you, she said. I couldn't stop my tears at her words. It's been 3 years since Dad died, and I'm still running the factory, living fulfilling days. Out of the blue, Robert reached out to me, shattering the quiet. It had been so long for a moment I didn't recognize who it was.
It's me.
Have you forgotten? It's Robert.
Robert, you mean?
Yes, your ex-husband, Robert.
What do you want after all this time?
I just had some good news and thought I should let you know.
I really don't need to hear it.
Don't be mad. It's not bad news for you. Me and Susan's kid got into college. You, on the other hand, seem to be living the same lonely life.
I wondered why he would contact me, and then I thought, it must be something trivial. Did he expect me to feel regret or envy upon hearing his news? Perhaps Susan told him to reach out to me. I could almost see Susan's face gleeful at that thought. Why do you think my life is lonely?
Come on, you're still single, right? Susan told me. She said you're the type to brood over things, that you'd never accept the reality of her taking your husband. You must have been holed up all this time.
Typical Susan. She seemed to know me well. But people change over 20 years, and I'm no longer who I was back then. I am married with 2 kids.
What?
After 20 years of no contact, it's odd that he would assume I'm still single. Maybe he thought I was still carrying a torch for Robert. Now that would be a joke.
Your partner must be some poor guy, right? Your dad was just a worker at a small factory.
Dad passed away 3 years ago.
Huh?
I thought about informing Susan, but I didn't know where she was. Mom said there was no need to go out of our way to tell her, so we didn't contact her.
So the old man's dead? Does that mean the factory closed down too? That's a shame.
You don't know anything, do you? Don't you read the economic magazines?
What are you talking about?
My dad's factory specialized in making precision electronic parts. And there was an engineer who fell in love with the precision components my dad produced. This engineer frequently visited my dad and offered to support his company. Together, they achieved success in developing new parts. Their precision became widely recognized, and my dad's expertise started to garner both domestic and international acclaim. Before he knew it, the factory had become famous. It's often featured in economic magazines. I don't know, nor do I care to know what kind of life Robert and Susan are leading, but they seem to be out of the loop when it comes to current affairs. My dad's factory has expanded to a second one now, and it's making over $100 million a year.
Really? Seriously?
We all work hard for it, so we didn't have the time to reminisce about you guys. Your kid got into college? I couldn't care less. Did you think I had a family here to share such joys with?
That's
still the optimist, I see. Robert fell silent at my words. Perhaps he thought time would have forgiven everything. And to come to me with such news, I can't fathom he's in his right mind. I am relieved all over again that I divorced such a man. That's why I have my happiness now.
So you just said your father's factory is making $100 million a year?
And what of it?
Well, Susan's his daughter. She has a right to her inheritance. Hand it over.
There's no such thing.
You plan to keep it all to yourself, huh? But I won't let you. We have something called forced heirship right here.
Even if that were true, Susan's claim could be offset by the money she took with her. Besides, at the time of his death, my dad didn't have any assets. I said it was my dad's factory, but he was nothing more than an employee.
What do you mean?
The factory almost went under because of the money Susan took. No matter how much we struggled, the debt just grew, and when we were at our wits' end, the man who offered to help bought the factory from Dad. That's how we managed to settle the debts. In truth, my dad, who was originally a technician, had also wanted to focus more on that than on management. The buyer was young and had just started his own business, but he was enthusiastic and honest, and he valued my dad's skills highly. That must have communicated to my dad. So the sale went through. The factory continued to employ all its workers without fail, and Dad could dedicate himself to developing parts which truly made him happy.
What a foolish thing to do!
What we do is none of your business. There's no need for you to comment on it.
So in the end, the factory was just taken over. What are you doing there? Working as a part-time lady? Tough luck.
The man who bought the factory is my current husband.
Huh?
Yes, I was drawn to the sincere personality of Timothy, the husband who had been coming to see Dad. My parents felt the same way. So when it came to me marrying Timothy, they both cried tears of joy. When we informed Robert's parents about our remarriage, they were genuinely happy for us. That was the last time. I haven't been in contact with them since. I stopped reaching out because I think it's painful for them to be reminded of what Robert did when they see me.
Your husband? What about him? Did you deceive a man and steal a factory from your father?
Really? You can only come up with such low-quality ideas. I don't even feel like talking about this anymore.
Just wait. My son got into college. And not just any college, but a prestigious private university. He'll be your nephew.
So what?
Well, I mean, give us a celebration gift. The cost for college, all in all, is $30,000.
Are you stupid? Why would you think I would pay that money?
Because your husband is making a profit. So it wouldn't hurt to give that much for your nephew's celebration, right?
Is that why you contacted me? All this talk about property and whatnot? Is it all about the money? When I asked that, Robert's voice seemed to crack. Maybe he was a bit flustered. Seems like I hit the mark. After 20 years to come asking for money from an ex-wife you abandoned, what kind of nerve? Sure, that child is my nephew. But considering what happened, doesn't a 50-year-old man understand he's not in a position to demand anything? I feel deeply ashamed that I was married to such a man.
Actually, the company I work for is about to go under, and I'm on the list to be laid off. If things stay this way, I won't be able to pay for my son's college fees. So help me out. He's your beloved nephew, isn't it?
I don't know this child you're speaking of, nor do I have any obligation to celebrate. You've done enough to ensure that. Don't you understand?
It was a long time ago. Can't you just let bygones be bygones?
With that, Robert started crying over the phone, using tears to persuade me. My heart only grows colder. Does he think crying will get him forgiveness? I don't have the slightest belief that there will be a day when I can laugh and meet with them. Don't expect a day to come when I let this go ever.
So you don't know about Dad and Mom? I tried contacting them, but I couldn't get through. And when I went to their house, it was on the market. They haven't, have they?
I don't know, or rather, you haven't contacted them once in these 20 years?
I didn't have any business with them.
So now you're in trouble, and that's why you're contacting me?
I have no other choice. Do you know where they are? If you know, tell me. They are my parents.
Actually, both of them are now living in a paid nursing home, having sold their house for the money. I haven't seen them for a long time, but I recently received a postcard letting me know. I think we won't meet again. Now I just hope they live peaceful days. If Robert were truly concerned about his parents' well-being, that would be one thing. But for someone who's only looking for their whereabouts to ask for money, why should I bother telling him? I truly don't know. I haven't been in touch since then either. So I'm going to hang up now. I can't be of help to you, or more like I don't want to be. I have no intention of getting involved, no matter what happens. Don't forget that.
How could you?
After that, there were a few more calls, but I blocked them. Then it seems Susan reached out to Mom. Hey Mom, please, I need help. Robert said he'd managed to cover college costs by asking relatives, but he got turned down and, well... During that conversation, when their son pressed them on why relatives had refused to help, it seems Susan and her husband finally told their son about the circumstances of their marriage. That's when their son blew up, yelling,
That's the lowest of the low. I'm ashamed to have you as parents. This is the worst.
And he left the house. Robert was fired from his job and couldn't find another, was kicked out of his apartment for not paying rent, and is now forced to live a hard life in a dingy, cheap apartment in an alley without sunlight. He's working part-time jobs from morning till night, but it's not enough to catch up with his debts. It seems Susan was crying on the other end of the phone, begging for help.
What goes around comes around. A perfect example. Happiness built on the misfortune of others can easily crumble. You should chew on that thought for the rest of your life,
Mom said before hanging up the phone. We haven't heard from them since, so I don't know and don't want to know where they are or what they're doing. I just want to keep working hard and honestly, protecting my family and the technology left behind by Dad's factory. I am supported by my family smile. I'm truly happy every day.
That's the end of The Old Hag. The voice was unmistakably Sheila's. It was still dark outside, 4 a.m. What could Sheila be doing in the bathroom at such an early hour? She must be talking about me when she says old hag. Terrified, I quickly returned to bed. It was a good thing I woke up just then. Otherwise, I would have fallen into Sheila's trap. I never thought Sheila would go that far. I think realizing her plan was where her luck ran out. I'm Amelia Weston, 65 years old. I live a peaceful life with my husband Randy, who retired last year. Technically, our 32-year-old son, Michael, also lives with us, but he seems busy with work and play. He's hardly ever home, just comes back to sleep. It's worrisome that he hasn't experienced doing household chores even in his 30s, so I've suggested he move out on his own a few times, but he refused, saying, "Why? I only sleep here. It's a waste to pay rent." Michael, always out having fun, you were so much more responsible at his age. I complained to Randy, who just chuckled. Well, having many friends is a good thing. I suppose, but with his pace, marriage seems far off for him. Randy agreed, and we both laughed. However, by the end of that year, Michael introduced us to a woman saying he wanted to marry her. If he's made up his mind, we wouldn't object. After meeting her, the two quickly got married. Sheila is 10 years younger than Michael, only 22. I was shocked by her age when Michael told us. At first, I thought she looked like a small animal. Short stature, big eyes, and quite adorable. More importantly, the love she showed while talking to Michael was evident. It seemed like she was the one pushing for the marriage. Michael is so lucky to be loved so much by Sheila. Our son being deeply loved by his partner is the best thing for a parent. I meant it in a good way, but Sheila glared at me. Amelia, stop making snide remarks. What? I've thought this for a while, but you are excessively caring towards Michael, overbearing even. Really? I never meant to be overbearing. Actually, when Michael was out and about, I just told him, don't bother others. Other than that, I left him be. I did ask for updates about dinner plans, but didn't interfere in his other activities, nor did I frequently contact him. Yet Sheila says I cared too much? He's your only son, and I get that he's precious to you, but once he's married to me, he became part of my family. I'm the one closest to him now. Well, that's comforting. I had heard from Michael beforehand that she was quite possessive, but I never imagined she would be jealous of me, his mother. I guess she really loves Michael. He might have married someone a bit peculiar, but she's a good person. I reassured myself, thinking, they're newlyweds, they'll settle down in time. Randy and I even laughed it off, thinking it was sweet. However, even after a year, then two, Sheila never let her guard down. At dinner, she always sat next to Michael, and she never left his side, not even for a second when they were out. It must be hard for Michael. I wonder what will happen when they have kids. Randy and I were genuinely concerned. 3 years after Michael and Sheila got married, Randy passed away. He went so suddenly, even in his 60s. It was incredibly lonely, but friends and neighbors often checked in on me. Thanks to them, I recovered faster than I expected. Concerned about me living alone in the big house, Michael started visiting more often. But it was only about 3 times a year. I don't think that's too often. But someone wasn't amused by this. Sheila. I get that you're lonely since Randy's gone, but don't drag us into it. I never once asked him to come. It's great when he visits, but I've never forced him. I told Sheila just that. What? Stop playing the victim, acting all lonely on purpose. Aren't you ashamed to be so dependent on your son at your age? Dependent? And don't you even think about moving in with us. You'll disrupt our newlywed life. I couldn't keep quiet after hearing this. When Sheila went to take a shower, I called Michael aside. Could you please talk to Sheila? It hurts to always be painted as the bad guy. The bad guy? You don't know? When I relayed everything Sheila told me, Michael was genuinely shocked. Did Sheila really do that? Yes, she did. I get tired too, and I don't want things to get awkward between you two. You both should head back to your home soon. Michael paused for a moment, then replied, All right, we'll leave in another 2 or 3 days. Considering Sheila's attitude towards me, I wish they would leave today, but I accepted and replied, Okay, I understand. That evening at dinner, Michael made a shocking suggestion. Mom, why don't you move closer to us? What? We had just talked about this. What was Michael thinking? Seeing me flustered, Michael began to explain. You're still active and strong now, but you're not getting any younger, Mom. I worry about you living alone. Michael. I felt Sheila's glaring eyes on me, but I chose to ignore them. Thank you. I appreciate the sentiment, but I can't leave this house. It holds memories of my time with Randy. Besides, I have plenty of people who can help if I need it. Michael seemed a bit unsatisfied with my response. I get where you're coming from, Mom. I'll think about it some more. You should too. Yes, thank you. Touched by Michael's unexpected concern, I drifted off to sleep that night. The next morning, I woke up and saw that it was only 4 a.m. It was still pitch dark outside. I got out of bed to use the restroom. Huh? While walking down the hallway, I heard a noise. What could it be at this hour? Curious and a bit cautious, I followed the sound. It was coming from the bathroom. Peeking gently into the bathroom, I saw a silhouette and the light of a mobile phone in the darkness. Then I heard a faint voice saying, This is the end of the old hag. That mocking laughter was unmistakably Sheila's. What could she be doing in the bathroom at this hour? She must have been referring to me as the old hag. Scared, I quickly returned to my room and got into bed. 2 hours later at 6 a.m., driven by curiosity, I went back to the bathroom and then bumped into Sheila. Oh, Emily! Good morning! Good morning, you're up early. She usually wouldn't rise until breakfast was ready. Noticing my suspicion, Sheila gave a breezy laugh. I'm leaving tomorrow, so I thought I'd clean the place today as a thank you for letting me stay. Thanks, but you really don't have to. No, it's the least I can do. Oh, please don't go into the bathroom now, I'm cleaning it. Feeling the pressure from Sheila's assertiveness, I just nodded. For the entire day, I was kept away from the bathroom on Sheila's orders. After dinner, while tidying up, Sheila quietly approached. Emily, I'll take it from here. You can go take a shower. But why? She had never offered to help before, and now this? It puzzled me more than pleased. Just relax. How about soaking in the bathtub? I've prepared it for you, Sheila said with a broad grin. Michael even chimed in. Wow, Sheila's being so kind, and laughed. However, seeing that I hesitated, Sheila grabbed my hand and led me to the bathroom. Look, I prepared aromatic candles for you. Oh, how beautiful. Several aromatic candles adorned the dimmed bathroom. Their faint glow looked magical. Just hop in like this without turning on the lights. But the ambience reduces the relaxation from the aroma, she said and left wishing, Enjoy your bath. Am I overthinking? Is this just Sheila being nice? Lost in thought, my eye suddenly caught sight of the bathtub, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What is this? I instinctively turned on the bathroom light, and there it was, clear as day. The bathtub was filled with a black liquid. Bath salt? But I've never seen this color before. There's no way I'm getting into that bath, that color. Sheila's actions are concerning. Feeling uneasy, I quietly stepped out of the bathroom. Looking around, only Michael was in the living room. I discreetly approached Michael. Michael, where's Sheila? She went out. seemed in a good mood. This is my chance. Can you come with me for a sec? I took Michael back to the bathroom. Look at this. Whoa, that's a wild color, right? I don't really want to get in it, but you went through all this effort. It'd be bad just to take a shower, wouldn't it? Michael nodded. Yeah. Then I'll go first. Wait, what? It's probably just bath salt, but with this color, it's hard to get in. If I prove it doesn't stain the skin, you'll feel relieved, right, Mom? I gratefully accepted Michael's offer. When I went back to the kitchen alone, the dishes were still piled in the sink. I wonder where Sheila went. As I was rolling up my sleeves to wash the dishes, I heard a noise from the entrance. Sheila, who had just returned home, saw me and exclaimed, Emily, why aren't you in the bath? Well, Michael said he wanted to go first. As we spoke, a shout came from the bathroom. Sheila rushed into the bathroom with a panicked expression. I followed right behind her. Michael, are you okay? As Sheila flung open the bathroom door, Michael was there, rinsing him off with the shower. Sheila, what is this? It smells so bad. Oh, come on, just close the door. We'll talk when I'm out. After being scolded by Michael, Sheila closed the door with a downtrodden look. So, what was that all about? After finishing his shower, Michael confronted Sheila. Well, it's not exactly... It's not a bath salt, is it? That thing smelled terrible. I feel like the smell is still there. I'm sorry. So, what's with the black stuff? Sheila, with a pale face, didn't answer and looked down. Sheila! Upon hearing her name, Sheila shuddered. She hesitantly replied, It's squid ink. What? That black stuff, it's squid ink. Both Michael and I exchanged surprised looks. Sheila, why would you use squid ink? I thought it might be healthy, Sheila said, avoiding our eyes. Michael glared at Sheila. Then you try getting in now. I'd rather not. Sheila's words from this morning echo in my head. A suspicion suddenly arises within me. Could it be because I mentioned I'm allergic to squid? Sheila froze at my words. It seems I was right on the mark. Come to think of it, I told Sheila about my squid allergy in our casual chat the day before yesterday. Knowing my allergy, Sheila prepared a bathtub filled with squid ink. My head ached at the thought of such a bizarre idea. What's the deal with that? Is this some sort of cruel joke? It's not what you think. I just wanted to help Amelia relax. Sheila buried her face in her hands and began to cry. Is she thinking that crying will solve this? But I won't let it slide. So this was the old hag thing you were talking about? What are you talking about? Wait, Amelia. Sheila tried to stop me, her tears pausing, but I continued on. I heard what you said in the bathroom around 4 this morning. You were awake, Amelia? Sheila's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. This is clear act of malice after all. But Michael always favors you. He's always worried about you. I was just so jealous. Sheila tried to deflect with a barrage of excuses. Basically, she was just jealous as always. Michael sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. I was skeptical when I heard from Mom, but it seems her story was true. What? Sheila stared at us, her face pale. What did you tell Michael, Amelia? I was dumbfounded by her audacity. Blaming me after what she's done? How foolish can she be? I'm sure Michael felt the same, looking at Sheila with disbelief. That's enough. You've never been one to reflect on your actions. I'm done. Michael! I smile spread across Sheila's face, perhaps thinking she was forgiven. But in the next moment, Michael's words shattered that. Let's get a divorce. What? Sheila stood still, a frozen smile on her face. Wait, Michael, why? How did it come to this? This doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense. You tried to hurt Mom. Do you even understand what you've done? Sheila paused for a moment, but soon spoke up. But in the end, Amelia didn't go in. It was just an attempt, so I'm innocent. Michael shook his head at Sheila's protest. Do you really think it's that simple? It was only an attempt because Mom noticed, and I hate people who scheme behind the scenes. That's cruel. Sheila rushed over to Michael and clutched at his shirt, but he quickly pushed her away. So you're choosing Amelia over me? I wish she'd stop playing the victim. Seeing Michael not responding, clearly annoyed, I spoke up. I can't stand to watch this, Sheila. Sheila glared sharply at me. Did Michael ever compare us? Did he even ever belittle me in comparison to you? in cooking or household chores? Well, no. At least from Michael, I've only ever heard good things about you. He must have truly cared for you. Sheila glanced at Michael, who nodded without looking up. Yes, I never once saw you as a replacement for Mom, and I never compared. I genuinely liked you, Sheila. But it's over now. Trying to hurt Mom with lies, it's just malicious. It could have been disastrous, Michael said with finality. Sheila's face turned bright red as she trembled with anger. How could you both accuse me like this? It's unfair. It seemed like talking to her was pointless. We decided to call Sheila's parents and ask them to come and pick her up. When they arrived, she was still yelling, "This isn't over!" But they took her away, almost dragging her. Later, a meeting was held with Sheila's parents present. Luckily, they were reasonable people. After we explained the situation, they looked pale and apologized profusely. Yet they seemed overly indulgent with their daughter and pleaded in unison, "Please don't divorce her!" Apparently, Sheila was deeply infatuated with Michael, and they were worried about what she might do if they split. "We promise, we'll ensure this doesn't happen again." Sheila remained silent, looking down. I could tell that Sheila genuinely liked Michael. Perhaps that's why she acted out of jealousy towards me. A little resentment is one thing, but after this incident, I can't just forgive and forget. I'm a parent too. I understand how you both feel, but did you really listen? One wrong move and I might not be here now. Sheila's parents looked up and gave a wry smile. "That's a bit exaggerated. We admit our daughter did something foolish, but it wasn't that severe." Allergies are not a joke. It's not just a prank. Sheila knew about my allergy and still acted out. She probably did it because she was upset I might live near Michael. When I looked at Sheila, our eyes met. She quickly looked away. She knew exactly what would have happened if I had gotten into that bathtub. "I feel the same as my mother. I can't go back to how things were with Sheila. I'll always be reminded of this incident," Michael said, looking at Sheila. "I'd rather break up now before I get more disappointed in her." Sheila burst into tears again. "Give me a chance. We might be able to work things out." "It's impossible. What if we have kids and you get jealous of them? The mere thought terrifies me." Michael apologized deeply to Sheila's parents. "Please, divorce." Sheila's parents seemed taken aback, but they probably realized reconciliation was impossible after seeing our firm stance. They began to persuade their daughter. Still, Sheila refused to accept the divorce. "If you go that far, I'll demand a larger settlement. Are you ready to pay a huge amount?" "Stop it! Sheila, just give up." Ignoring her parents, her hair disheveled, she shouted, "No, I won't let go. What about the compensation? Can you afford it?" We wouldn't backtrack on the divorce just because of a demand for compensation. Is she so confused that she doesn't even get that? Most importantly, we haven't done anything to warrant such a demand. On what grounds would you demand extra compensation? Infidelity, perhaps? Making up lies won't work in your favor. If you play that game, we can play too. Realizing my determination, Sheila's parents stepped in hurriedly. Seems they judged that a conversation was impossible. "We'll persuade her to agree to the divorce." "Thank you." And so, our conversation with Sheila ended. The last time we saw Sheila, she looked pitiable, with her hair and face disheveled. I couldn't sense any of the charm she once had. Thanks to the efforts of Sheila's parents, the divorce went through. Relieved, Michael and I sighed. She might not have been a bad person, but she wasn't a good one either. "Michael, you've always had bad luck with women." We laughed it off. By the way, Sheila moved back to her parents' home and now lives under their watchful eye. She tried everything from self-improvement to working at nightclubs, all to get back together with Michael. Because of that, she spent too much and is now chased by debts. I do feel a bit sorry thinking about her parents. Michael and I started living together again. He seems to have a wide circle of friends as always and goes out often. However, he comes home earlier than before and has become more consistent with his communication. "I need to start taking life a bit more seriously." That's what he said. He's back to being single, so maybe he's been doing some soul searching. He's even started to chip in with household chores. As for me, with the help of those around me, I'm living a peaceful life just like before. Michael's divorce was unexpected, but thanks to him helping around the house, I've had more time for myself. Even at this age, I'm thinking about picking up a new hobby, and I've been talking about it with my friends. I want to enjoy the rest of my life a bit more before Randy comes to take me away.
Everyone has one or two secrets they'd rather keep hidden. I'm no exception. Back in the day, I was quite a wild child, although now I've become a demure and unassuming woman. Losing my parents at 15, I quickly went astray and joined a gang of troublemakers. I gathered some of the girls from the gang and formed a ladies' group. Thanks to being forced to learn wrestling by my dad since childhood, I was known locally for my overwhelming strength, surpassing even the boys. My life in that world came to an end after meeting a certain person. But living such a life, it seems you inevitably accumulate some lingering issues. My name is Nancy. Now 35, I live as an ordinary housewife, working at a local supermarket. With my light makeup and quiet demeanor, no one would guess that I once wore flashy makeup and rode around on motorcycles. Yes, I was a member of a delinquent group and the leader of a ladies' gang. But then I met my husband, Joshua, and everything changed. It all started 10 years ago, during a clash with a rival gang, when Joshua unexpectedly intervened. That gang used to start fights at every gathering. One day, a particularly fierce brawl broke out. Joshua joined in to save his brother, a member of the rival gang. As members of both groups were falling, Joshua and I were the last ones standing. I even remember Joshua laughing at his mistake, realizing his brother wasn't even there. His dignified appearance somehow struck me, and I found myself speaking to him. "Hey, you're pretty cool." "Me? Really? Looking like this? You must have some strange tastes." "Were you calling out for someone named Noah? Did you find him?" "No. It turns out my brother wasn't here." That's how our slow, private conversation began. Joshua's brother, it seems, was an irredeemable delinquent. Joshua had even taken up boxing, trying to reform him. Joshua himself admitted he couldn't stand to ignore wrongdoing. He struck me as a man brimming with a sense of justice. Through our conversation, we grew close. Over time, we met more often, and it became clear that we had feelings for each other. But back then, Joshua despised delinquents. Despite our mutual attraction, my involvement in the delinquent world prevented our relationship from progressing. Finally, Joshua said that if I left the gang for good, he'd want to be with me. Tired of the senseless fights, I took the opportunity to leave the group. We started dating and got married 5 years later. The group I was part of got disbanded by a rival faction 2 years after I left. After marrying Joshua, I completely transformed into a calm and graceful woman. But recently, our peaceful life was threatened by a certain neighbor, Joshua's sister, Sonia, and her husband. One day, as I was about to see Joshua off to work, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? "I'll check." The next moment, Joshua looked surprised. "Sonia?" He mentioned his sister, whom I knew. I had met her once at a family dinner. "Hey Joshua, we've moved next door starting today. Please take care of us." "Hello, I'm Tony, Sonia's husband. Well, looking forward to your cooperation." "You are?" The two of them started off with a disrespectful attitude. But since one was Joshua's sister, I couldn't be too confrontational. We get along well with the in-laws, so I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. And it turns out Tony was the person who lured Joshua's brother, Noah, into the delinquent world. They both went to the same high school and were a year junior to Joshua. Joshua turned 34 this year, so they must be 33. Sonia, 3 years younger than Joshua, should be 31. "Joshua, too bad about your brother, huh?" "Tony, I don't care about Noah anymore." "Even you?" Joshua was visibly angry. His brother had passed away due to a fight. Joshua's brother and sister apparently never got along well. Sonia felt neglected in favor of her brother and developed a rivalry, which eventually extended to Joshua as well. Joshua once mentioned how difficult it was to deal with his sister, preferring to dote only on his brother. And like me, Sonia was also a former member of a delinquent group. Unlike her voluntary involvement, Noah was forcibly recruited by Tony. Seeing his siblings' transformation, Joshua probably grew even stronger in his sense of justice. As the three glared at each other, I spoke up from behind Joshua. "Joshua, you need to leave for work soon." "Ah, right. Running away, Joshua? Remember, I haven't forgotten that you laid hands on me. That was because you attacked Noah." "Alright, both of you, enough. We're done here." With Sonia's words, Joshua left for work, still unresolved. And at the same time, the bell tolling the start of Sonia and her husband's harassment began. An hour after Joshua left for work, the doorbell rang. But when I checked, no one was there. An hour later, there was a loud noise at the entrance, as if something was violently placed there. When I looked, there was a heap of cardboard boxes dumped in front of the door. What's this about? No one was around, so I decided to ignore it and went back inside. Then I heard a small popping sound from the balcony. I hurried over and found 3 broken eggs scattered. We live in an apartment, on the corner, next to the room Sonia just moved into. This means the harassment likely came from Sonia's room, as there are no neighbors on one side and it's too high for someone from below. Angry, I confronted my next-door neighbors. "Hey, is that you? What do you want showing up like this?" Sonia greeted me with an irritable demeanor. "Is this your idea of a prank? Throwing eggs on our balcony?" It had to be Sonia or her husband. The angle only made sense from Sonia's balcony. But Sonia glared at me, replying, "What? Don't be absurd, lady." "Lady? You got proof we did it? Make false accusations and I'll call the cops." Despite being a former gang member, her reliance on the police in such a situation seemed second-rate to me. "I have no proof, but the way the eggs are scattered, they could only come from your balcony." I tried to remain calm, but Sonia kept glaring and arguing back. "Proof? That's weak. Hey, Tony, the lady next door is complaining." Hearing this, Tony joined in. Hey, just because you're Joshua's wife doesn't mean you'll get any special treatment." If Sonia was second-rate, Tony's words were no better. He might think he's intimidating, but to me, it's not frightening at all. I could feel my old self stirring, but I didn't want to revert to my past. So I played the role of a meek, unassuming woman and said quietly, "Please, don't raise your voice." Inwardly, I wanted to deliver a roundhouse kick right then and there, to snap that foolish neck. But having reformed after meeting Joshua, I didn't want to throw away all my efforts for something like this. Seeing my reaction, they both burst into laughter in front of me. "Aha! So, you're Joshua's wife? I thought you'd be something special, but you're just a dull woman. Weak." Tony was giving you too much credit. At the family dinner, you seemed like a real introvert. A kick alone won't suffice. I might need to dislocate a joint or two. Trying to control my rising anger, I was told, "Go on, leave," and the door was closed on me. I stood there, staring at the closed door. I pondered telling Joshua, but knew that even if he spoke to Sonia, they'd just feign ignorance. It would only result in more harassment and frustration for me. So I decided against it. The next day, and the day following, the harassment from Sonia and her husband continued. It always began after Joshua left for work. "Who dumped this garbage at our doorstep? It must be those two." As I was about to leave for work at the supermarket, the door got stuck halfway, blocked by a bag of garbage. I reluctantly took it to the disposal area and then headed to work. 5 hours later, I returned home to find, "This is unbelievable!" There was a cardboard box in front of the door, arranged like a table. On either side of the box, lit candles were placed. and in the center, a vase with flowers was set. On the door above, a photo of me, taken who knows when, was stuck. They were mocking me as if I was deceased. Furious, I was about to kick the cardboard away when Joshua called from behind. "Nancy?" Startled, I turned around to find Joshua, who had come home from work. "You're an hour early." "I got off work early today. What's all this?" Joshua was also surprised at the sight in front of the door. We quickly cleaned up the cardboard and candles from the shared hallway and went inside. There, I told Joshua everything that had happened. "So it's likely Sonia and her husband? But we don't have any proof, so even if we confront them, they'll just deny it." After a moment of thought, Joshua had an idea. "Let's buy cameras, one for the balcony and one for the entrance, especially hidden well at the entrance." I agreed with Joshua's suggestion. There was a limit to how much more we could endure. We immediately purchased cameras online. We had the cameras delivered to Joshua's workplace to avoid suspicion. For now, we'll just have to endure until the cameras arrive. Then we can retaliate with evidence. Understood. So, I bore the harassment from Sonia's house for the next couple of days. For most people, endurance means being unable to fight back due to lack of strength or fear. But for me, it was different. I was holding back the urge to retaliate. In a world where using force was permissible, I would have already verbalized those two. Having the ability but not being able to use it was incredibly frustrating. 3 days later, Joshua came home with the cameras. "Any trouble since?" "The usual. Today, they even threw a fish head onto the balcony." "Let's set up the cameras right away. Put one behind the air conditioning unit on the balcony, aiming at Sonia's balcony. We'll hide another near the fire extinguisher, by the entrance." The day after installing the cameras, Sonia's antics started again as Joshua left for work. I monitored everything through a recording app. Sure enough, the two of them started their antics. I silently observed and left for work when it was time. 2 hours into my shift at the supermarket, Sonia lined up at my register. Well, well, if it isn't my sister-in-law. I silently scanned the items. It was clear from Sonia's tone she knew it was me, her demeanor dripping with condescension. "Aren't you a bit cold for a cashier? Shouldn't you be more hospitable? Come on, give me a discount on this." Other customers were lined up behind Sonia, watching our interaction with concerned expressions. "Hey, I'm not a scarecrow, you know." A middle-aged man in line spoke up to Sonia. "Hey, can't you see she's uncomfortable?" Sonia whirled around, glaring fiercely. "Shut up! It's none of your business." The man seemed completely deflated by Sonia, who suddenly yelled at him. The man shrank back and left the line. I then addressed Sonia for the first time. "Ma'am, if you continue to behave inappropriately, I'll have to call security." I spoke in a calm but icy tone. Perhaps mindful of the others watching, Sonia retorted, "Geez, it's just a joke. Ugh, so disappointing," and left the store, abandoning her items halfway through the transaction. The other customers stared in astonishment. My anger was just about to boil over. When I returned home after work, there was a notice on the door. The note on the door read, "Useless cashier." That's it. I can't take it anymore. I ripped off the note in frustration and waited anxiously for Joshua to return. After Joshua got home, we reviewed the footage from the cameras. It clearly recorded Sonia and her husband's misdeeds. Now we can fight back. All right, let's go now. Anger filled Joshua's eyes. When we rang Sonia's doorbell, Tony answered. "You two again? What do you want this time?" Sonia appeared behind him. "What do you want, Joshua?" The two of them asked lazily. We finally began our counterattack. "You two!" As I started to speak, Joshua stopped me and stepped forward. "Nancy, let me handle this." Sonia and you, Tony. If you harass us any further, it won't end well for you. Joshua's voice was low and menacing. Tony retorted, What? You want to fight? Do you even have proof we did anything? Making baseless accusations like before. Before Tony could finish, Joshua started playing the video saved in the recording app. What? This is our video, capturing your wrongdoings. We had to install cameras because your harassment was too much. This silenced the usually talkative pair. Tony? Sonia, showing a hint of panic, turned to Tony. Tony, frowning deeply, glared back at us. Damn it! Got us this time. The trouble started from your end, remember? I said with a serious face. Tony retorted, So we settle this with force, huh? Wait there, Joshua. I'm calling someone. Call whoever you want. We'll be ready. Joshua stood firm, undeterred. As the situation escalated, Tony desperately pleaded into the phone. William, I need backup, now. His tone was completely different from the bravado he showed us, repeatedly begging for help. After hanging up, he turned back to us. Get ready, William, the most notorious guy around here, is on his way. He smirked at us, convinced of his imminent victory, but relying on someone else's strength showed his true cowardice. Why don't you confront us directly? Keep talking. I know your strength well. I called a special guest this time to ensure you both feel real terror. What a pitiful sight it was. No matter how much they threatened, neither Joshua nor I felt any fear. You must be too scared to even speak. The quiet and meek Nancy, right? Sonia taunted me with a condescending tone. 5 minutes later, the much bragged about William arrived. However, he looked surprised when he saw us. William, over here. Long time no see, William. Sonia and Tony were visibly excited, having high expectations of him. But their expectations were quickly shattered. What's going on here? Indeed, long time no see, Will. My calling him Will left Sonia and Tony with puzzled expressions. Joshua also greeted him. It's been a while, Will. The couple looked even more confused by this interaction. Confused, Tony asked, What's this? How do you know William? As Tony spoke with sweat on his forehead, Will looked back and forth between us. I simply said to him, Well, let's not do this, okay? Hearing this, an angry Tony retorted, Don't joke around! William, please, do something! Please! Sonia and Tony were frantic, unable to grasp the situation. But then Will addressed them. Hey, don't tell me you mess with Nancy. His question left the couple momentarily stunned. So what if we did? Tony answered hesitantly. Furious, Will shouted, Idiots! Don't you know who you're messing with? His rebuke left them standing frozen. They clearly had no idea what was going on. Seeing this, I turned to Joshua and said, Hey, Joshua, can I revert to my old self from 15 years ago, just for now? Instead of Joshua, it was Will who turned and responded. Nancy, please, don't. If you do something to them, it might not end up more than just an injury. What? You're giving me orders now, Will? No, I didn't mean it like that. Being the special guest they called for help, now humbly apologizing to me, Sonia and Tony were bewildered. What's happening here? Their faces turned pale as Will spoke. Do you two know about BBN? Well, yes, it's famous. It stands for Black Butterfly Nancy, right? The nickname of the former leader of a ladies' group. That's right, and this lady here is Nancy herself. No way. Really? What? Both lost their bravado in an instant. Continuing, Will said, Back then, I led another delinquent group, but we were decimated by Nancy's group. She could take down 30 people by herself. Sonia and Tony now looked at me fearfully. It made sense. They'd been harassing someone who they thought was inferior, only to find out she was the leader of a ladies group they themselves had once belonged to. I didn't know. Nancy is practically a legend. We joined the group 6 months after you left. As Sonia said, she and Tony had joined the group half a year after I had left. Will had been scouted by me and stayed in the group even after my departure, and looking after Sonia and Tony as their senior. He left the group just before it was decimated by a rival group. By that time, Tony had taken over as the leader and was the last leader before its downfall. Before you ruined it, it was an invincible group. You can't match Nancy. How could this? Tony was increasingly cornered and distressed by Will. Well, the group that took you down is now the strongest in New York State. But if Nancy was still active, she would still be the strongest. Hearing this, Sonia and Tony collapsed, their spirits broken. Seeing this, Will turned to me and apologized. Please forgive them for my sake. Watching Will apologize, Sonia and Tony had completely lost their will to fight. They never imagined their call for help would backfire this way. Alright, but you'll have to settle your dues properly. I glared at the two of them and said, Ah! They let out a short scream. For 1 month, you'll clean this apartment and our balcony that you dirtied. If you skip even 1 day, I won't be so forgiving next time. Okay. Sonia, completely intimidated, managed to stutter out her agreement. Tony, unable to speak, just kept nodding frantically. Watching them, Will commented, No one can really stand up to Nancy. Hearing this, the silent Joshua finally spoke. But I hate delinquents. If Nancy hadn't reformed, I wouldn't be here. Looking down a bit, Joshua said softly, and I peered up at him. Don't worry, I won't show that side of me again. Will burst into laughter at this scene, and we all ended up laughing together. Will and Joshua knew each other because the three of us had met after I left the group. We bumped into Will while on a date and had tea together. Well, now that's settled, why don't you come over for dinner, Will? We three left Sonia and Tony slumped by the entrance and headed to our apartment. Before entering, Joshua added, Sonia, you're my sister, so I'll let this slide just this once, but there won't be a next time. Watching him, I wondered if he too was hiding the same fighting spirit as us. From that day, the harassment from Sonia and her husband completely stopped. As promised, they continued cleaning our balcony and the common areas of the apartment. Though just delinquents doing chores, other residents sometimes looked at them curiously, but that soon stopped. After a month, Sonia and her husband left the apartment without a word. Even Joshua, their blood relative, didn't know where they went. They probably left, feeling awkward about staying in the same place. We had no reason to get involved further and thought they finally made a wise decision. Finally, we had our peaceful life back. Though neighborhood troubles are common, I never thought I'd be directly involved. At least it was resolved amicably. I have a past I'd rather keep hidden. Joshua has kept it secret all this time. I'm not ashamed of all my past, but I have reflected on my mistakes. I just want to cherish my life with Joshua now. And I hope to live without ever showing my true nature to anyone again. That's all I'm thinking about now. My husband changed me, someone who used to shy away from social interactions. With him, I thought I could be truly happy. Yet, after we got married, he changed. It started with yelling, moved on to shoving, and ultimately, he kicked me while I was sick in bed. This is not the man I married. Love has turned into fear. I want to run away, but I'm scared to do that too. But I know, at the end of the day, it's on me to speak up. Let's break up. My name is Scarlett, 29 years old, I've been married to Daniel for 2 years and I'm a housewife. I lost my parents at a young age, and the grandmother who raised me passed away when I was in high school. I was bound to be lonely forever. Since my grandmother passed, I had been uncomfortable with relationships. Simple reason, really. It hurts when people leave. That's why I never had a boyfriend or close friends. I had always been on my own. But Daniel was different. He changed all that. He took an interest in me, a rather gloomy person. I'll never know. He asked me out repeatedly. At first, I was honestly annoyed by his persistence. But eventually, I gave in and found myself caught up in his world, realizing Daniel had become the most important person to me. That's how we ended up getting married 2 years ago, and now I'm questioning whether I should stay married, because Daniel changed after we got married. Within a few months into our marriage, he started coming home less and less. He wouldn't even tell me what time he'd be back and started criticizing what I was doing around the house. Why isn't my dinner ready? If I told him I thought he would be late, he'd just sigh and look at me with cold eyes. You're staying home on my dime and can't even manage the housework? What a wife! And just like that, he'd grab his change of clothes and leave the house. That's when I started making dinner every day, even if he wasn't coming home. But on those days, he wouldn't come home for a week. Is he tired of me? Did he see something he didn't like after marrying me? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I don't want the sweet memories I have with Daniel to be a lie. I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to be alone. My mind was a mess. After living like this for 6 months, I decided something needs to change. I don't want to be a burden on Daniel, and honestly, we're hardly a married couple in this state. When Daniel finally came home, I asked if he was considering a divorce. To my surprise, he looked shocked. That's not it, Scarlett. I've been busy with work. I'm sorry for being cold lately. Please don't talk like that. In a moment of panic, Daniel hugged me, the first time in months. Suddenly, I felt guilty for not considering how busy he was with work. But if he doesn't communicate, I can't understand his struggles. I asked him to keep me in the loop moving forward, to talk to me when something's up. Of course, I promise. Seeing Daniel's smile made me feel relief for the first time in a while. For a moment, our troubles seemed like a lie, and life returned to normal. Even though there are still days Daniel doesn't come home, he keeps me updated. Just that alone started to make me happy again. However, 1 year after we got married, it was the day of our wedding anniversary. Daniel stood me up and never showed at the restaurant we had reserved. I was heartbroken, especially since it was our wedding anniversary, and I had never thought he'd cancel. Of course, it was because of work. I tried to be understanding since it was work-related, but it still hurt. I wish you would have told me sooner. When Daniel came back the day after our anniversary and I told him that, he glared at me. Why would you say something like that? Don't you see how hard I'm working? I do appreciate that he works hard, but I wanted him to prioritize our anniversary. When I expressed this, Daniel knocked the food off the table, shattering the dish. The sound echoed in the room. You're so selfish! Are you sure you're not just after my money? Daniel's mom, Olivia, who's my mother-in-law, founded her own company. Daniel and his brother work there. So many have pegged Daniel as the future CEO, and he had warned me that gold diggers had targeted him before. The only one who really loves me is Scarlett, he once happily told me. And honestly, I've never once thought about his family wealth. When I told him this, Daniel looked at me with eyes full of disbelief. Then get a job. You've got too much free time if you're complaining about me. You'd do it if you really loved me, right? Would a job solve this issue? I hesitated, but ultimately nodded. I didn't want Daniel to think I was with him for the money, and more than anything, I didn't want him to leave me. I started to question my sanity. I had come to think that Daniel's anger was a result of something I did. So I found a full-time job. If I tidied up before and after work, Daniel wouldn't complain. Then, one day, Olivia contacted me. Scarlett, I heard you're working now. What happened? Weren't you planning to quit after getting married? I responded with a forced smile, saying I had time to spare. Olivia has always been kind to me from the moment we met. She's a busy CEO, but checks in on me. I vividly remember the time we went shopping right after the wedding. She looked at me like a dream had come true. Daniel used to have a sister, who tragically passed away. Maybe that's why Olivia is extra kind to me. Reach out if you're ever in trouble. Her kind words nearly brought tears to my eyes. I never knew my parents, but I wonder if this is how it would feel to have a mother. Thinking about it warms my heart a little. I don't want to cause any trouble for Olivia. Supporting her son, Daniel, is my role after all. But that's easier said than done, especially when Daniel doesn't come home. Ever since I started working, there's no longer any money being handed over to me. I mean, we're getting by, but is this really okay? I find myself troubled by the same thoughts over and over. Nothing has changed since back then. Maybe something needs to change. Just when I was thinking this, Daniel came home after a long time. Did you say anything to Mom? I tell Daniel about the call I got. He seemed angry at first, but smiled in relief when he found out I hadn't said anything to Olivia. That's my wife. Make sure to tell Mom we're getting along just fine, okay? I ask Daniel if we're really doing as well as he thinks. I can focus on my job as the future CEO because you handle things so well, Scarlett. Once you're the CEO's wife, I'll treat you to a lavish life. Hearing Daniel so satisfied with that, my heart sinks. I never wanted to be a CEO's wife. I just wanted to build a happy home with you, Daniel. That was enough for me. As I say this, I feel a sharp pain on my cheek. Daniel slapped me. How dare you say that? When I'm working so hard, I married you, so just listen to me. This isn't the Daniel I knew. Tears start to flow. Even my crying seemed to anger him more. Wake me up when dinner's ready, he said, and stormed off to the bedroom. I made dinner while crying that night, and ate a tasteless meal in silence with Daniel. Things went downhill from there. Daniel started coming home more often. Perhaps Olivia said something, but he was cold as ice to me. I've thought about leaving him, but would he agree to a divorce? I didn't know. And what if he hits me again? Ever since that day, Daniel would poke or lightly kick me. I find myself flinching whenever he raises his voice or hand. He even made me quit my job, even though it was his idea for me to work in the first place. Was it just to torment me? I have no idea what Daniel wants from me. My sole focus every day is not to get yelled at by Daniel. Amidst all this, Daniel invited me to Olivia's birthday party. There'll be a lot of people there, so don't embarrass me. Get your hair done on the day and wear something appropriate. Despite the rough times, I was looking forward to a break. Seeing Olivia will be my strength to get through the days, but my luck ran out, and I came down with a high fever on the day of Olivia's birthday. I have a fever of 103, and it might even go up. I can't go to the in-laws' house, I tell Daniel. As expected, Daniel yells at me. How could you get sick at a time like this? You're useless! I apologize over and over, but Daniel kicks me repeatedly through the comforter. I'm going ahead. Get ready and come to my parents' house. Despite my high fever, Daniel insists that I should come. I can't go like this. Ignoring my soft murmur, Daniel just leaves the house. If I don't go, who knows what he'll do to me next? Desperate, I put on makeup, fix my hair, and get ready. But every move is slow, and my foggy head just takes too much time. Before I know it, over an hour has passed since Daniel left the house. Daniel calls to rush me, annoyed that I haven't arrived. Get it together! Come to the celebration now! Are you trying to embarrass me? I quickly call a taxi and arrive at the in-laws' house. This should prevent more scolding. But when I get there, the relatives and guests look at me with disbelief. Scarlett, what are you wearing? Even Olivia, who notices me, looked puzzled. I catch my reflection in a large, full-length mirror in the in-laws' house. My makeup and hair are a mess. The word disheveled would be an understatement for how I look right now. I apologized to Olivia, who was giving me a cold stare, and she sighed in disbelief. Scarlett, you should break up with Daniel. To which Daniel chimes in cheerfully, Come on, Mom, give her a break. She just overslept. She didn't even remember it was your birthday. I bow my head at his unhelpful comment. Then a loud slap resonates. I look up to see Olivia has slapped Daniel. What? Why? With a face of disbelief, Daniel stares at Olivia. Daniel, did you force Scarlett to come even though she's clearly unwell? Is that how a person should act? Daniel tries to argue back, but gets slapped on the other cheek before he can speak. I have evidence that you're having an affair. Shall we talk about it? Olivia takes Daniel into the study. I'm led to the guest room by my brother-in-law Andrew and rest there. Whether it's the medicine kicking in or exhaustion, I drift into a deep sleep. When I wake up, it's nighttime. Daniel sits in submission and Olivia looks exasperated in the living room. Olivia quickly fills me in on what happened. Apparently, Daniel had been dating someone even before we got married, and he had plans to marry her. Turns out, Daniel's ex had a kleptomania issue. She even stole from Olivia when she visited their home. Naturally, Olivia banned her from the house and made it clear that they wouldn't support Daniel if he married her. That's why Daniel chose me as his cover-up. He thought I looked like his late sister and that Olivia would like me. If Olivia approved of me, he figured he would also be in her good graces. Olivia didn't say more, but I think Daniel also saw my docile nature as easy to manipulate. Daniel planned to break up with you after he became the CEO. I've only met Scarlett a few times a year, but she seemed less lively each time. That's why I investigated my son and Scarlett. I'm really sorry about Daniel. With that, everything made sense. Daniel never loved me from the start. Surprisingly, I felt more relieved than sad, because I'd already been thinking I should leave. Love had turned into fear after all the shouting and physical abuse. Olivia, I'm leaving him. Olivia nodded. Daniel, you better pay the alimony properly in court. Sign these divorce papers and this pledge, she demanded. Quit my job? And $50,000 in alimony? Are you kidding? Daniel was in disbelief. As I was trying to wrap my head around the fact that I might lose my job, Daniel turned to me for help. I really loved you, Scarlett. I was just meeting my ex because she's relentless. I didn't know what she'd do if I didn't. Trust me. He pleaded through tears, but his tears weren't for me. I still have the bruise you gave me this morning. I could easily get a medical report and file charges. Sign the papers if you don't want to be sued, I warned him. Olivia, unaware of the physical abuse, burst into tears and started hitting Daniel. You're a terrible person! Don't ever come back home. We're done, she yelled. Afterward, brother-in-law Andrew stepped in. Daniel signed the papers, crying. If he regretted it so much, he shouldn't have done it in the first place, I thought. Maybe I also had a part in this for putting up with it for so long. Watching Daniel cry, I vowed never to neglect my feelings again. After the divorce, I focused on moving and job hunting. It was a hectic time. But Andrew helped with finding a new place, and Olivia even referred me to a job. I was being pampered, really. I managed to find a job in the same field as before, and recently got the offer. Of course, I was hired on merit after a proper interview, not because of connections. But ever since, Olivia has been a bit overprotective of me, which worries me a little. Starting a new job while adjusting to a new lifestyle is bound to be challenging for a while. Still, right now, I feel more satisfied and secure than anxious. About a year after my divorce, I happened to run into my ex-husband Daniel loitering near my workplace. I just wanted to talk. He looked awful. His clothes were dirty, and he lacked the energy he once had. Long story short, he'd been dumped by his girlfriend and wanted to get back together with me. I couldn't help but laugh. I then showed Daniel my hand. On my right ring finger was a new ring I just received. I've been dating your brother recently. Not sure about marriage yet, but I do know he's a much better person than you. Plus, he's next in line to be CEO. Daniel had always arrogantly assumed that he, as the eldest son, would take over the family business, but Olivia never considered the irresponsible Daniel as a successor. Being married to you was a struggle, but there's one thing I'm grateful for. Thank you for introducing me to your family. I'm cherished here now. With a smile, I conveyed this to him. Daniel collapsed on the spot. He fell to his knees, sobbing. That was the moment I felt truly glad to have left him. While I still can't contemplate marriage due to my history with Daniel, I've decided to once again trust those who supported me during my toughest time. From now on, I'll live being true to my feelings.